Hello and welcome to the Strong Suit Podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. And I'm always excited to welcome a fellow recruiter to the show. And today I've got the only, none other than Brianna Rooney. How are you, Brianna?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. Just for the audience's benefit, Brianna focuses on recruiting in arguably the tightest labor market in the US, which is Silicon Valley and San Francisco, in the tightest industry, which is the technology industry, in the tightest type of role, which are engineers, software developers, that type of person. You've got a very, very tough job these days.
I do. Thank you for recognizing that.
Yeah, and I'll give you credit. And so we're going to spend the next 20 minutes really debunking some of the myths that people may have about recruiters, about headhunters, executive search. Wherever they pick those things up, that's fine. But maybe we can bring some light and shed some light on the industry for people that don't work in the industry and actually help them get the most out of the recruiters that maybe they do work with. So that's kind of the topic today. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds fun.
Why don't we start with just your personal story? Let's just give us 60 seconds for perspective. I understand you started in the fashion business.
Oh yeah, I was there for like a second.
And then you've been in this recruiting thing for over 10 years. So how did you kind of fall into it, or was it more of a specific choice?
Nope, completely random. Never heard about the industry before. I went to fashion because I wanted my own store. I wanted to design what was in it, and then graduated and realized, hi, you need money.
You like to eat.
Yeah, okay, oops. So then I was like, okay, think. What can you do? And my stepdad had a very successful, or still has a very successful company, and he's done sales. And so he goes, well, sales is the way to go, has no ceiling. So I said, okay, great. Now what should I sell? And my very good friend was in recruiting, and she did accounting. Took me out to dinner one night and said, all right, you've got the personality for it. I want to tell my boss about you. And I'm like, okay, great. And at the same time, I am not joking, that night, I get a call because my resume was on Monster. And I get a call from a tech recruiting company and said, hey, have you ever heard about recruiting? I'm like, I have now. Seriously, I'm not joking. It was the
so fortuitous. Wow.
Yeah. It was super crazy. So, instead of like going that route, because I don't feel like you always want to work with friends, even though I was young. Yep. And I took the interview, and that's where I worked. And they did tech recruiting in the Bay. I didn't know anything about recruiting, anything about tech. I didn't even know how to type. So
your learning curve was like this.
It was okay.
And then you started the firm Techees when, roughly?
Roughly a little less than almost 2 years into it with my other firm. Yeah, I started Techees.
Great. But the firm name now is Techees, correct?
Oh, no, yeah. I worked for a different firm before.
Great.
Yeah.
Super. Well, congratulations on not just being a recruiter in this market, but making a name for yourself, which is phenomenal, and starting your own firm. So you've got a great perspective to lend. Why don't we start with what do you think is one of the biggest myths or misunderstood things about being in recruiting? So if you think about your typical company or a CEO or a head of marketing, head of sales who doesn't work in recruiting, sure, what do they usually get wrong about the field?
Well, recruiters, first of all, have a really bad reputation. If you Google the recruiters are, not nice things come up.
Yeah.
So I think that people still think of it like this. Think of it like Yelp. You go to a restaurant and you have a bad meal. You don't know if maybe the person that made your food got fired that day, or, what I mean? There's so many aspects of things and so many different perspectives that people have, yet the negative, because that's how I feel like how people are, the negative stays in their minds. Now they could have had 20 amazing meals there, but guess what? They're going to remember that one bad one.
And it could have been as a candidate or as an employer.
Oh, exactly.
It could have been, yeah.
Exactly. So that's what they think of, because as any sales job there is, think about anyone that sells your house, your car, or whatever. It's at the end of the day, it's a numbers game to them. And that's how they are taught. That's how I was taught. All that I cared about was how much money am I making? What am I going to do with that money? All those things, right? And when I started Techees, that changed. My perspective completely changed and said, there has to be a better way. I want to basically sit back and have referrals up the wazoo because I did a good job. I want everyone to know that I did a good job and that they couldn't do it without me.
So would you
That
say
was
that, so
big
would you
on
say the myth is that, so I agree, the industry has this generally negative tinge, probably
Mhm.
well-deserved in many cases.
Absolutely.
And so what I hear you saying is that listeners should understand there are phenomenal recruiters and there are those that
Really
deserve the bad reputation, right?
bad. Absolutely. And so that's what I wanted to change. That's the hugest myth. So once you have this thing on like, okay, especially the tech industry,
Yeah.
there is no company. I mean, I would say maybe 98% of companies work with recruiters that might be higher
Yeah.
because there is no way, first of all, this is a full-time job. There is no way that they can actually do their job at their company and get it going in this very competitive market without help finding engineers.
Now, some companies do that internally. They hire
Yeah.
internal recruiters, and others, perhaps smaller ones, will hire outside recruiters. What is the difference for those that haven't really thought about the
Yeah.
difference between the two? Is it a different skill set, or is it largely just the same recruiter? You're just paying them in a different configuration. You're paying them maybe a salary internally or a transaction fee externally.
Yeah. So it's going to be hard to choose my words on this because I'm an external recruiter and a lot of in-house recruiters. So I've done this for 11 years. I can count on my hands, less than my
I'm
fingers.
looking at 10 fingers.
Oh, yeah, 10
Just for
fingers.
the record.
10 fingers. Oh yeah, no one can see me. So 10 fingers. How many good in-house recruiters I know?
And why is that? What are the common patterns?
The common patterns are either the ones who have been external and weren't very good at it. So therefore, companies hire because they don't understand what it actually takes to be good at it. So they just go, oh great, this person has experience. I'm sure they can hire our people. So that's a problem. Or they're just people that had an HR background that said, hey, wait, you deal with people. There's no reason why you can't find our people, right?
Right.
Like you have time on your hands.
And
Okay.
it can be a very different skill set to do
It's
HR,
very
generalist,
different.
and recruiter. Although some people I've seen make the transition, but a lot of people, to your point, assume they're the same thing, and they're probably not.
Exactly. And like you said, it can happen. Actually, one of my best recruiters over here was my HR admin.
So
And I was like, yeah. And I said, wait a minute, you are meant for something more.
So to that end, Brianna, what did you see in her? What are those unique characteristics that define the top few recruiters that really do justice to their clients? What are they all about?
Okay, so first of all, you have to be organized. You have to pay attention to detail. You have to care. I think that's a biggie. That's what separates a good agency towards a bad agency.
Mm-hmm.
Because my old agency, for example, my quota every day was to send 50 resumes every day. It didn't
whom?
matter how I got
1050 resumes to whom?
To our clients.
To employers. Got it. Okay. Got it.
It didn't matter how I got there. It didn't matter if I talked to the person. It did not matter if they were right for the job. I had to send 50. That was my quota.
Yeah.
So I probably send less than 50 resumes a month.
So that really was throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what's there. And to be fair, there is a portion of the recruiting industry that uses that path, and just because of sheer volume, it works. But
yep, totally.
The company, the employer, just needs to understand there's not a lot of vetting, there's not a lot of assessment and matchmaking going on, right?
Exactly. And that's, again, where companies, so still to this day, I kind of thought that was like maybe an old tactic because I've done my tactic for so long. I figured I'm sure the industry has to be better now. It's not. That's sad. I have 3 people here from past agencies that I'm like, oh my gosh, I had to completely retrain. That kind of blew my mind. A lot of recruiters do not know what a good resume is. Therefore, companies don't understand that. So companies think, okay, great, I'm going to get whatever recruiter,
right,
and they're going to solve all of my problems.
Right, which is not realistic.
That's not realistic. And not to mention, I work with a lot of in-house recruiters now because that is more common because they need to hire so much and they have better things to do.
So this may be let me pause you, Brianna, because this is a question that a lot of people may not understand. Listeners, why would a company need internal recruiters who then hire outside recruiters? There must be a reason for it. It happens all the time.
All the time. I'd say now most of my companies also have in-house recruiters.
So can you explain that to someone that doesn't know the difference?
Yeah, so now there's a lot of in-house recruiters because probably they don't have exactly a ton of experience doing it, but they handle the process and they're in charge of basically making sure that the company is on top of what they need to do.
Got
They're
it.
getting feedback in time, they are getting to the resumes in time, and I work on contingency. So basically, they only pay me when I place somebody.
Right.
So they're paying this person no matter what. And a lot
So,
of times this person is needed just as a pure admin.
yeah, that person is almost like a recruiting project manager
Right.
who's not actually recruiting, but they're
Mhm.
overseeing the recruiting.
Exactly, exactly. Now I have seen some in-house recruiters that they expect them to do both,
Hmm.
which, you're only working with one client, shouldn't be too terribly difficult.
Yep.
But I will say, there's a reason why we work as a team, that we're all working on all of these different recs because there's a lot of people out there. It's very competitive, like you said, and you have to put some tender loving care because our engineers will have like 5 offers.
So speaking of which, let's talk about the funnel or
Mhm.
the pipeline or whatever you want to call it, the ratios. How many, if you're an employer and you're looking to fill what's a typical job that you work on? A software engineer, software
Yeah, just
developer,
say software engineer. Yeah, exactly.
software developer. How many candidates or individuals need to go in the top of the funnel to get to kind of a short list of people that seem to have the skills, seem to be interested to get the one hire? Is it a 1-to-5 ratio, a 1-to-500 ratio? What does that funnel look like?
That's hard because it's going to depend on the company and it's going to depend on when that company brought us in. Did they bring us in when they first started the search? Did they bring us in towards the middle? Or did they bring us in when they're so desperate they don't even know what to do anymore? And yeah, you typically want to get brought in after they've already tried it on their own and failed. But you don't want to be brought, well, I mean, I guess you could be brought in at the end because that's kind of fun too.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, as a company, you don't want to wait that long. If you can't fill your own rec or at least come close to it
Then
within
something's
30
wrong.
days, exactly, then within 30 days, there's something wrong.
But you made an interesting statement. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you
Yeah.
just said, if you're a company and you can't fill it in 30 days, then something's wrong. Isn't that saying that a company shouldn't need, ideally, in a perfect world, shouldn't need to use outside recruiters?
Well, yeah, in a perfect world, they shouldn't have to. But here's the thing, there's so much competition in the tech world, and there's so many people trying to do the same thing with also, I mean, look at Lyft and Uber, for example.
Yeah.
They have buku bucks, but they do the same thing.
Yeah.
So they're competing like crazy. I mean, that's just one small example.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, to find engineers, I mean, you can't fill it in a month. I mean, that's hard. But if you're not reaching into your employee referrals and you really getting your job out there, there's a lot of noise that you have to get past. And I don't care how much marketing you put into it, it's hard to get past that. I mean, with LinkedIn alone, I mean, they have tons of people are posting on LinkedIn. It's like kind of silly to post on LinkedIn now. It's probably easier to go through a recruiter.
So as a recruiter, what is working now? How would you explain to an employer or a CEO or a head of sales or whatever the best way to find candidates these days? There's so many places to look, and a
So
lot of those don't work anymore. What is working?
I actually think the most powerful tool now, keep in mind, I've tried many, as many as I can, because if there's a better way, let's show it to me. But right now, LinkedIn has their game, but it's not regular LinkedIn. They have LinkedIn Recruiter. And if as a company that is hiring, it doesn't matter if you have an in-house recruiter, if you do not have LinkedIn Recruiter, you will have a hard time hiring.
I
Very hard.
agree 100%. Explain briefly to a listener who doesn't know the difference, LinkedIn regular versus LinkedIn recruiter.
Well, their most powerful tool right now that they have introduced is there's an open to opportunities button.
Yep.
So this is hidden to employers. So for example, let's just say I work at Google. Even if Google has the LinkedIn recruiter, they cannot see I'm looking. So it's really confidential.
Right.
But everyone that has LinkedIn recruiter that has needed your skills have saved you hopefully into a project or something like that, where it pops up on their screen saying this person's actively looking.
Right.
And you can even put in there like what you want and stuff like that. So that, I think, has really changed the game.
Just that one field basically is worth, I think they charge what, 10, 15 grand a year now or something like that. I mean, it's a lot of money, but imagine how much faster a search can go if you have access to that one little teeny tiny field. It's kind of silly if you think about it.
It's crazy and good for them.
So LinkedIn is working. LinkedIn Recruiter is working. What else is working in terms of sourcing candidates?
Well, for us, that's what we use all day, every day. They have
the phone, unlike 10, 20 years ago, before you joined the field,
yeah,
we used to use the phone and
right.
call candidates. That's not very common now initially.
No, not initially. We're not cold calling anymore. I mean, I have this beautiful database that has, 11 years worth of people in there. That's amazing. And that we do use as well. But back in the day, I used to go through and call those people.
Yeah,
and I don't do that anymore. People don't want to be called at work. They aren't used to it. They're used to all these different telemarketers, all their nonsense.
What about texting? Is it okay to text a candidate?
Yes, totally.
What percent of candidates get pissed off if you text them?
I've never had anyone get pissed off, to be honest. Yeah, I know.
Not once. Wow.
No, I had not once, but I don't cold text them.
So explain how does someone do that?
The difference. So if someone gets back to me and they have shared in anything, even in any capacity, let's just say I've reached out to someone in my database, they get back to me just once with just even a maybe they're interested. Once I have that, then I feel fine to text.
Got it. So you wouldn't text me initially?
No, I wouldn't.
On an email, you would say, would it be okay if I send you a message that way?
Well, no, I never asked for permission.
Oh, you don't ask? Okay, got it. You assume. You asked for forgiveness, not permission.
Always. I believe in that.
I like that. I like that. You and me both.
Oh.
So your own internal database, which sounds obvious, but I think a lot of employers forget that they have an internal database, an employee tracking system typically, right? And it's usually a mess, but many of them forget to even use it and look.
Trust me, I could go on and on about what I think companies do wrong in hiring. And I feel like that could be a job, although I love my job so much that I don't know if I want to do that. But no, that's like, they have so many resources and over the years have probably had tons of people apply to them that they haven't even remotely tapped into.
Absolutely.
Or wait a minute, how about this? How about going to who applied for this job before? Because I'm sure you've looked to fill it before.
Yeah. Or the spec has changed and this candidate we rejected last year, but they'd be perfect now.
Yep, exactly.
Because we've upgraded the role or downgraded the role or something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, if you have a good recruiter, they're doing that for you. But guess what?
Sure.
You do that on your own technically.
Sure. But it does take time. To your point, a big part of the recruiting process is outsourcing time to save you time.
Exactly. What's your time worth? And guess what? I specialize in what I specialize in and you specialize in what you specialize in. Let me do my job and you do your job.
Yeah. And there are so many kinds of recruiters. I'm based in Chicago. I focus on sales, marketing, CEOs, et cetera, on a retained basis. You focused on the West Coast, on software development, on a contingency basis. You really need to pick a recruiter whose background and structure matches what you're looking for. Not all recruiters are created equal.
Absolutely. Only sometimes will I venture out of my specialty because one, it doesn't make sense for me efficiently, but only if it's a company that I have worked with very successfully for a long time will I ever make that.
So what advice would you give to an employer who's thinking about using an outside recruiter? What questions should they ask of a recruiter to decide if they'd be a good match to work together?
How do they source? Do they use job boards? If a recruiting company still use job boards, you're probably not with the right one.
Yeah.
If I would say, what info do you give me? How much do you source? I mean, what questions do you ask a candidate? I think is really important.
So what's your assessing methodology?
Exactly. Yep. How involved are you throughout the process? Now, that is a whole other thing because I think what companies do wrong is if they're not involving the recruiter who represents this person in the process, there's issues. And
how do you mean? I don't understand. Explain.
Okay. So they're coming to us because they need help.
Right.
Well, sometimes the help isn't actually getting the people interested. It's how do they close? What is their interview process like? So I think that people don't use their recruiter enough. They should ask, hey, what's working? What's not working?
Right. So a lot of times they'll ask the recruiter, hey, get me some resumes, and then they're out of it.
And then leave me alone.
When the recruiter really could be adding a lot of value and getting the deal closed.
Exactly. We actually have a company right now who hasn't worked with us before, which is kind of like, it's our job, it's our job to tell them, look, this is how we work and this is why it's successful.
Yep.
And they're response was, oh, we got this. We can close our own candidates. Okay. Well, we have the situation where they're not keeping us in the loop. Well, luckily, we're very close to our candidates on a regular basis, as much as we can be, right? Some people don't like it. But the only reason why we even know he's getting an offer is because he told us. The company didn't tell us.
Because they wanted to try to not pay you the fee or something else.
No. That doesn't happen that much anymore.
They're just too busy or
no,
whatever.
They just think they can negotiate and handle themselves because again, they think, well, it's not in our best interest to have them negotiate. They get paid more, that's probably what they think, I'm assuming, because you do get paid more with a higher salary. However, I mean, if you have a recruiter that you trust, you would hope that they have both of the people in mind, you would think. And so what happens is they come to us and say, when it's too late, hey, so-and-so hasn't gotten back to us on our offer. Can you follow up? Well,
that's not a good sign, right? They didn't get back to you.
Right.
You may have lost them.
Exactly. They probably already lost them, where really all that had to been answered is like, let's just give me an example of something that's happened. Is we had this one person who was moving and their significant other really wanted a certain health benefit. And he was trying to figure out, our company, if they had the right health benefits, but this person was taking too long. And so in the meantime, this other company offers them this amazing health benefit, which is what the significant other cared about, not necessarily the person. The significant other. Well, guess what? That drives a lot of people's job search. So in the meantime, they're trying to sell him on, the opportunity and all this other stuff and the salary, when they didn't care to say, hey,
what's important to you?
What's important to you? And we know what's important to them, but they didn't ask that typical question. And a lot of times people that are looking for the job are extremely uncomfortable in negotiating circumstances.
When you say people, do you mean the employer or the candidate?
I mean the candidate. I mean, a lot of times the candidate, they use us just maybe for that one component that they want us to handle this.
They feel awkward asking, or they don't want to burn the bridge with the person that could be their manager in the future.
Right, exactly. And even something so small like health insurance, this person felt uncomfortable asking.
Right.
And so instead of just asking, they took the other job. And that could have been saved. And
it's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking for me, heartbreaking for this person.
Over something relatively small.
It's super small. And that stuff happens all the time. Lots of times people are declining offers over something incredibly small that could have been handled a different way.
Other than health benefits, what are one or two that you think are common that are relatively small?
Well, you know what happens, and this is another thing companies should watch out for. A lot of people have passed on jobs because of who has interviewed them. Basically, someone that's interviewing them is probably already out the door and they're negative.
Yeah. So they're underwhelmed with the people interviewing them, and they're like, I don't want to work for this company based on what I've seen. Absolutely. Absolutely. Brianna, this has been fascinating. We could go on all day. How can people learn more about Techees or get in touch with you?
Yeah. So techees.com, techees.com. LinkedIn, like I said, is super powerful. Brianna Rooney, just get me on there. And also with my new e-course that has come out, it is themillionairerecruiter.com as well. So definitely check that out if, you want to see how I train, if you want to become a recruiter yourself, or, whatever you need.
Awesome. Thank you so much for making the time. It was great.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a great day.